Good afternoon. The time is now 5:02. The Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education special regular meeting for Wednesday, February 9th, 2026 will please come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Colleagues, Alicia Lill,
Here.
Paris Bendy,
Here.
Pryor,
Here.
Heidi Cater,
Here.
Valentina Ayers,
Here.
Dan Ginestra. Dan Ginestra is present. Millen Sahoni.
Present. Thank you, Dan. We have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda items. There is no consent agenda this afternoon. There are two items on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk please take a roll call vote again?
Colleagues, Alicia Little,
Yes.
Paris Bendy,
Yes.
Sheila Pryor,
Yes.
Heidi Cater,
Yes.
Valentina Ayers,
Yes.
Dan Ginestra. Dan Ginestra is a yes. Millen Sahoni.
Yes, thank you. We have an agenda. Both items on the agenda this afternoon relate to the superintendent search. As you might be aware, the school board has hired MSBA to assist in the search. Also assisting is Wayzata's Executive Director of Human Resources, Dave Lutz. Barb Dawn, Director of Executive Search Services, MSBA, will present both items. Barb, please take over.
Thank you, Chair Sahoni, members of the board. It's good to see you all again. I am here tonight to present MSBA's recommendation for your semifinalists for the position of Superintendent of Wayzata Public Schools. Before we get into that, I did have a couple of housekeeping items I'd like to revisit first before we move into the actual candidate consideration. The first thing I'd like to briefly discuss is an update on a question that Director Bende, asked a question about in terms of feedback from the day in the district. So all of the finalists, 2 or 3, will spend Thursday, March 5th, all day in the district. And during that process, we talked a little bit about the building tours they'd be getting and the executive leadership team accompanying them, and also different school community groups being a part of a large group meeting with each of them individually and providing feedback to us through an online form. One of the things that Director Bende asked about was when would we get that feedback? Is it better to get it before or after our board interviews on Friday? And having thought about that a little bit more, my first reaction was you had the luxury of some time to review that input before your board interviews on Friday morning. And then I was thinking about it a little bit more, and I was visiting with Executive Director Lutz about it, and I'm wondering if it would make more sense from a process standpoint for us to collect all of that input and not give it until after your interviews on Friday, because we don't want to influence your perception of those 3 finalists or 2 finalists. And yet it would give our staff a little more time Thursday night and Friday morning to winnow it down to some high-level themes that emerge from each of those districts or those groups. So that would be a little different. The only thing I think that we were hoping for from you, and I'd like to discuss this further, is the feedback we get from that large group or from the tours with the candidates. There might be some areas of wonderment, is that the right word? Wonderments, that might cause us to think, the board should ask about this on Friday. So I wanted to check with you, instead of you seeing all of that feedback Friday or Thursday night and trying to come up with questions on Friday, if you would entrust that to Executive Director Lutz and myself, that if we see an area that needs to be addressed in your interview with these folks, we submit a question or 2 into the round 2 questions, which we have not selected yet. But that would allow us to build off of the day in the district and not influence you as board members when you hear from them yourself for the first time. How do you feel about that?
So, thank you. So when I was thinking about that question, that is the exact thought I had, that if there is any way for you and Dave to kind of look at the responses and maybe insert questions. So if that's okay with everyone, at least that would be my preference. Yes.
One comment I would add is that I think it's a really effective way to do it in that manner, because when you're doing an interview, you're assessing that one moment in time, right? So when the board is interviewing the candidate, you want to provide, your feedback and your assessment based on that interview you see. And then we'd be able to give the compilation of the data from the day in the district as another measurement of those candidates, right? And then you have the information about any references that are another component of the interview process. So by doing it that way, you're kind of keeping those different things separate, and there's I think it builds to a really effective process that you can then weigh everything on in its own category and on a whole to make your decision. So I'm actually pretty excited about the concept. I think it's a unique way to do it. And thanks for that comment and that question, because that's what helped us start to think about, okay, we know we want to build in that school community feedback. When and how is the appropriate way to do it, so that, again, it's not impacting negatively another piece of the process.
So I think I had kind of not a concern, but something that I mentioned last time, having us look at your inputs on Thursday night and, depending on how many pages they were, that's a lot more work added in addition to the whole day interview on Friday. So I'm glad that this is a solution. I'm really happy about this. And I'm also happy that there is an old adage which says too many cooks spoil the food. In this case, the more cooks we have, the better off we are, I think, because this is a collective discussion. We think collectively, and thank you and Dave for your feedback. I'm okay with it. Yeah. Everybody else? Looks like everyone is yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciated the question again because it just gave us some time to think and process what would serve the board the best, as well as the candidates and the people participating in Day in the District. So
But really quickly, I want to make sure the board is supportive of both that process, but then you're also supportive of, if there is that, what we articulate the pattern in the data saying, oh, this would be a great interview question, you would allow MSBA and Barb and working with me to make that recommendation so that you'd have that interview question show up on the next day.
I think it's the whole
Everybody's supportive
package.
of that? Okay.
all right, wonderful. Thank you. That was the first housekeeping item. Another thing I wanted to touch about just briefly is I want to circle back to our original conversation about when we were talking through the vacancy brochure and the salary range that needed to be included in a brochure. And that was published as part of this posting. So I wanted to circle back to it because there was a question about inserting some sort of incentive pay or performance pay into the contract with your new superintendent. And so I didn't want you to think we haven't continued to investigate that. So we have done a great deal of research on it, and I think that performance pay incentives can be transparent and justified. They are extraordinarily complicated, however, and there are a lot of things to consider in doing so. And what we would end up recommending to you, and it may have been a conversation you've already had at the board table, is that the current contract manner, which does not include performance incentive, be utilized for the first contract cycle with a new superintendent, and you spend the time over the next 1 to 3 years of the contract really investigating why would it be something you're interested in? Let's see, what's the purpose of it? What type of performance are you going to evaluate? What things can a superintendent reasonably control? Can you tie it to academic outcomes? If so, what evidence would be required? What considerations would be involved? So there's a number of things we identified, and we did a lot of research with the Office of the State Auditor in terms of what's recommended and what best practices are. And it really is truly individual. I can tell you, though, that it works well in some circumstances, and it works poorly in other circumstances. And it really boils down to a full board support of the idea and a clear understanding of the expectations of what that performance pay really means. And I don't know if you will effectively be able to do that with the first contract with this person. So it would be our suggestion that it not be a part of your first contract cycle with the new superintendent. However, of course, it's a board decision. So, and you may have already discussed this at a meeting I was not at, but that is the other loose end I wanted to revisit to let you know we've done some homework on performance pay.
Can I ask a question? What would you suggest? Let's say there is a certain number and you do first year with certain number, but then if we would like to consider, then wouldn't the superintendent accept it as a lowering down? At this point, you have to give more than in pay. Otherwise, like, it will sound like you're taking away some money, unless the superintendent obviously fulfills that goals which are set up. How would you recommend to avoid that kind of, being in that kind of situation?
Thank you for asking about that, Director Ayers. I would say that if someone accepting a contract with Wayzata Public Schools is aware that the board is beginning to do some research on the possibility of a performance incentive, and that would be a part of the conversation in negotiating another contract, and it may affect a base salary, I think that they would be open to that. I just don't want anyone to be surprised if you do or don't do it. And I have pages and pages of things to consider before you decide to do it. So I think just being very open with them and communicate clearly that this is the contract we have now. We are going to spend some time over the next year or two doing research on performance-based pay. This is what it could look like, but we don't know until that time comes. And so I always want school boards to make fully informed decisions. And as we got deeper and deeper into this, we realized that it's very, very complicated. And so we didn't want you assuming it would be a simple thing to add to your contract. It really is not. But I think if you communicate with someone up front, they should be able to almost expect it as a possibility in the second contract.
I think that from the information we read in summertime, Minnetonka is doing something like that. Am I right? It was that information was included. How did they manage? Or maybe it is conversation for later, obviously.
Yeah, I think the other thing to talk about, so again, I'm in agreement with everything that Barb said. I'd also say if you wanted to consider something in the second contract, you could stagger your way into, so each contract typically has cost of living increases each year. You could stagger your way into a performance pay by building the increases annually towards a performance pay chunk. So you could figure out a way over a 3-year contract cycle to build in different layers of performance pay with the annual cost of living increases being that performance pay. So I wouldn't necessarily think you'd have to automatically lower their base salary in order to build in performance pay. I actually think you could stagger into it across that cycle with increasing performance guidelines each of those 3 years of the contract. So I think there's a way to do it if it's something that after having that first contract of experience with the superintendent, you want to pursue. I think there's also a really good benefit of getting to know your new superintendent. And through that first contract cycle, you'll be able to identify those areas together of, where would you like to see this fit if it's something long-term that you'd like to do. So I could see a way of staggering into it where you wouldn't necessarily have to pull money out of the base to do so.
Yeah, and obviously points that you are making make sense. Question I have is, are there any basic metrics which any superintendent should be or will be targeting for, right? So yes, we're not trying to make it overly complicated, but year one, maybe there are making it up. These are the top 3 goals that pretty much every superintendent should have, right? So is there something we can look at it, again, not overly complicated, maybe simplistic goals, but again, just get into that cadence? And maybe it's more complicated than that, but again, what have you seen in your research?
So MSBA and MASA have a model superintendent contract that we've created together, the two associations, the Administrators Association and the School Boards Association. And every year we revisit that model contract so that both associations can endorse and support its use. I can tell you that performance incentive pay is not in the model contract because of the complexity and the individuality of each of the districts that may or may not consider that. Some of the questions that arose as we were doing the research, for example, some things to consider would be the purpose. Is the purpose to attract, retain, or motivate a superintendent? What performance metrics would you use? Would they be qualitative or quantitative? Would they be evaluation-based, student performance-based, strategic objectives or district goals-based, or financial stewardship-based? Communication is extremely important and clear targets. And then the research about the evidence of effectiveness of performance pay is mixed because the success of performance pay-based contracts is mixed, or everybody would be doing it. If somehow you were able to include some incentive in your contract that would cause your superintendent to do a better job, everybody would do it. And so it's not that common. So it must mean that it works in some circumstances, but not all. Because if it worked in all circumstances, I would think everybody would want to include that in there. So that was one thing, but I do think there are several models in use. We did have a district that when we come back and do a transition workshop with you, for example, this fall, we'll talk about expectations for that person's first year as your superintendent. And we'll talk about what goals in that first year will you evaluate them on? What rubric will you use to evaluate them on? Will you have the formative evaluation halfway through and a summative at the end? Will it be a 4-point Likert scale? You know, we really want to make sure everyone's clear on expectations because that first year, there's so much to learn that we would ask you not to burden a new superintendent with things that are extraordinarily sticky or complex because they're learning. And very often there's only 2 or 3 goals identified that first year. The highest of your high priorities is your performance evaluation metric there. We've had it go sideways where a board said, oh, we can do this. We'll just put it in the contract for a percentage of base salary if they accomplish these 4 things. And we'll use a 4-point Likert scale. And they felt very comfortable with it. The time came to conduct the evaluation. It did not go well because people interpreted the goals differently. Even though the measurements were there and there was evidence of meeting those same measurements, the whole board was not comfortable awarding the bonus. And it became a point of contention, unfortunately, in that person's first year that distracted from the work of leading the district. So until you've done the homework to know it fits and it's going to work well here and everyone's on the same page, I don't even know if there's anything really simple, Director Bende, to be able to say this is what we could use and it would work. There's just too many variables, I believe, because of course, they're going to do their job and they're going to do it well. You'll have a contract, you'll have a job description. That is what they are expected to do. Tying money to that outside of the compensation package you've negotiated just makes it more complex in a year that you don't want a lot of complexity. Someone's first year here, if that makes any sense.
It does. And sorry, one follow-up question. Is that typical in Minnesota or are you finding it across, the country? Is that the norm?
Our research was across Minnesota. However, from speaking to candidates from other states, it is not something they typically are seeing either. It is simply unusual, but that doesn't mean it can't work, and it can't work very, very well. We just want to be really certain that it's the right thing for Wayzata before you decide to engage in a contract like that.
Okay, thank you.
Is it reasonable to think about it this way as well? We have a pool of candidates who have already applied, and they have feasibly, it's possible that they've already taken a look at the contract that we have in place, and they know that there is no incentive pay, and that this is what it could potentially look like, and they're comfortable with that. So if we're thinking about it, like as you were talking about what is the purpose of the incentive pay, I think we've already attracted our pool. I think it's a very good pool. And it's where it's at given what we already have in place. Is that a reasonable way to think about it?
Yes, that's a great point. Thank you. The superintendent contracts across the state are public information, and I'm sure candidates would have done their homework before they're interested in any position to make sure it fits who they are. And it is not in there currently, so I would assume that they might assume it will stay that way. It's a good point. Thank you.
And to build off Heidi, who I think made a great point, is it also possible for us to say that if you meet your goals, we will be more open to a more sizable increase in pay, removed from any performance pay, we'll be more open to a better contract, so to speak, if you meet your goals without the performance pay piece? Could that also be said?
Yes, that's another excellent point.
And would you then, to ask a follow-up, would you then be able to help us within that time period? I think you mentioned for the performance pay piece, you do have documents that would guide us. Would you be able to help us in that pursuit as well?
I have passed along much of what we've learned to Executive Director Lutz, and I would then leave it in his very capable hands so that MSBA doesn't get enmeshed in your contract negotiations.
Yeah, and one comment I'd make on your first point, Dan, is we'd want to be careful to make sure that anything we do in the realm of performance pay is very transparent, right? So to say that your next contract will be more significant pending your performance in this contract, that's performance pay, right? And so we'd want to articulate that. We'd need to articulate that in a process that's transparent with measurable goals, et cetera. I would say that you don't introduce the concept of performance pay until you're ready. And when you do, it is very clearly articulated within the contract, right? So no, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, your next contract will be larger. I would stay away from that type of situation. What I would say is, hey, after this first contract, if you'd like to discuss a option of performance pay with the board for your next contract, that would be something that would take place with the superintendent evaluation committee of the board, and in collaboration with human resources, we would do that at that time. So I'd probably say my answer to your first question would have been no, because one of the bullets, I think, in the list that Barb gave was you need to be clear and transparent with those goals and how an increase in pay is earned. And so for that first contract, if we're not having performance pay in it, it's just the contract, right? If you're not meeting your goals, that's part of your superintendent evaluation process, which can impact, future contracts being approved at all by the board, right? Or renewed at all by the board. So that's where I would separate that. Those are two different concepts. One is the more standard concept of here's your salary, here's your goals set by the board. You have an evaluation process by the board, and successfully completing that evaluation process is what sets you up for contract renewal for future contracts. And then the second part is if you are in a performance-based pay situation, it's clearly articulated not only for the superintendent, for the board, but also for the school community and all of our taxpayers, so they know where those dollars are and where they're occurring, et cetera. So those are two separate concepts, and I would make sure that you're keeping them separate. Does that make sense?
Can I add one more piece to that? As I think about it, it's just really important to remember, too, that whenever the superintendent contract is coming up for renewal, it's always at the same time as others. And we have looked to our superintendent to be our fearless leader, and there have been times when the superintendent has actually taken a lower annual increase or had an increase that was aligned with our unaffiliateds. And so it's important to remember all of our bargaining units as we think about our superintendent's increases on a 3-year or a 2-year basis, whatever that contract is.
So as a board, we haven't talked about this since the last time it was brought up. And I think it sounds like it is a very complicated process, and there are a lot of considerations, and that the place for it would probably be in the superintendent evaluation committee to discuss it. And that in the meantime, we should probably follow your advice to not overcomplicate the hiring process. And also, whoever we do hire in this role, I think it would be, it would be good practice to have this conversation with that person. And so I don't know that, I wouldn't support putting any kind of compensation package as part of the negotiation process for the hiring.
Okay. Yeah, you have something else? Okay. So I'm going to answer, I think somewhere in your responses to my board colleagues, you asked what the purpose of this thing is. And I think the main purpose in my mind is accountability. Pay for performance basically to me means you're accountable to what you promised. And therefore, if you perform based on what you promised, this is the incentive. It's an incentive. It's not something that you take out of their salary. I think that $280,000 to $295,000 basically stays. And then on top of that, if you do such and such things, then this is what we will offer based on approval from the board. The other thing I heard from you was, this might be something I misheard, so correct me if I'm wrong. You were talking about learning what we should include in the pay for performance as we go along. And I think if that is not already clear for the board as far as what the district needs are and what we look for in the superintendent, then I think we really need to think again, because we know what we want, right? We have parameters that we have set. We have goals, strategic goals, a roadmap, and all those things. I think last time we discussed this, and we decided that for the first year we will not include the pay for performance. My memory serves me right, and then.
I don't think we had discussed it. We hadn't made that decision as a board.
Okay. You did not? Okay. I thought we did.
I recall that it was informally discussed at a previous meeting. I would, again, it's the board's call on this. I would, instead of saying first year, I would say first contract cycle, since we're going to have to articulate a contract cycle. Again, I think the benefit of being able to do more research, be able to know your new superintendent, and really develop a plan that works well for that individual and for the board, et cetera. That can take some time, right? And so I would say my recommendation would be that whatever that first contract cycle is, now if it's a year, if it's 2 years, if it's 3 years, our typical rhythm has been 3, but that would be my recommendation.
Okay. I have concerns about that. It is not the first time that I will not be, agreeing with the rest of the board. It has happened before. So if the majority of the board thinks that we should wait for 3 years at the end of the first contract cycle, then that's fine with me.
I think we're saying we're going to talk about it, so it's probably not worth digging into until we get more of that information.
Right. Okay. But we have to decide, right, before we start contract negotiations, whether we want to put that performance pay at the end of the third year or at the end of the first year, second year, whatever.
I would suggest that because you could also offer a 1-year contract.
Right.
And during their first year, negotiate another 3-year contract with performance pay incentives. What that will do, however, is cause some folks to reconsider the offer because 1 year is not very long. And most superintendents at this level will be looking for a 3-year contract.
Okay, yeah, that's fine, yeah, okay. So we will just do the 3-year contract, maybe without any conversation about pay for performance, right? Is that okay? Yeah. All right.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the great discussion around that. It just became a quagmire the deeper we got into it. The what and the how and the measurements and the goals, and is it qualitative or quantitative or student-based or merit-based or performance-based? And it just became so many questions that we knew it was a much larger subject than we perhaps had even initially thought. So thank you for the conversation of that, and I appreciate the chance to talk about that before we move on to the gist of the meeting this afternoon. So one thing that we have agreed upon before is that round 1 will be conducted by a subcommittee of the board. The Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee will be interviewing round 1 candidates on I think it's February 25, 26, and 27, a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And I will be contacting all the candidates this evening, and they'll be asking me for which dates and times are available. So that is something that we're going to briefly discuss with the 3 people on the subcommittee of the Superintendent Evaluation Group after this meeting concludes. So just to remind folks that the subcommittee process will be utilized for round 1. You as a board selected the questions already that subcommittee is going to be using. And then they will have a rubric to define the quality of the answers people may give them based upon probably a 4-point scale or 3-point scale. And then they will be coming to the board with a recommendation on March 2nd. The names are still not public on March 2nd, so please keep in mind the recommendation from the subcommittee will be to move forward candidates B and M and J. And we still can't use names until the full board considers that recommendation and eventually perhaps passes a resolution to interview those 3 alphabet identifiers. And then that night, those 2 or 3 names go public. But until then, please, private data is something that I know you take as seriously as we do, and I appreciate all of your help with that.
Can I have
Yes.
I would just want to admit a point of clarification on the subcommittee. There's 3 members on it, and the same 3 people will be doing all the interviews. So I assume we've made sure that all the people on the committee can attend all the interviews. Okay.
That's verified, yeah.
That,
Thank you for asking that. Yes.
if you can't make all of them, then someone else should probably.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. Yes, we would want all members of the subcommittee at every single interview. The idea is a level playing field so that all of the candidates experience the same thing, the same questions, the same interviewees, the same location of the interviews and things like that. So thank you for asking about that. All right, thank you. So I am going to verbally review the vetting process that MSBA utilized to come up with the recommended folks. I want to congratulate you on the strength of your pool. I will share with you a couple of highlights, and then I'll go through how we worked toward creating in our minds those who aligned most with your leadership profile, as well as the results of the public engagement summary report. Those are the 2 things we leaned on most heavily. So as you know, you did have 20 applications. Congratulations. They came from 7 different states, as well as 2 countries. Of those 20 people, 12 of them have previous superintendent experience, and that's as a superintendent, not an associate sup. So a lot of experience in your pool, and 13 of those 20 individuals do hold doctorates. It's a very strong pool. Again, congratulations. Obviously, this is a desirable position, and there were people from many states and a couple countries that were interested in it. So I'm going to disperse this to board members. This is the highlighted list I emailed to you on Friday. I'm going to collect these back from you when we're done, and I'm going to shred them when I leave the meeting tonight. So I'm just going to take a moment to hand these out. I'm sorry? You can write on those, absolutely. I'll be collecting them after you make your decision tonight, but you can certainly write on those. So this was in our proposal, and we talked about it in our interview as well, but I think one of the strengths of our team are the folks that help us conduct pre-interviews with candidates, do the vetting, check with references, and so on and so forth. And we have 5 people in the metro area who are former school administrators and 1 school board member that go through all of the applications and then compare them to those 2 documents. So once the application deadline has passed, they all review all of these applications, and they spend time on each of them, and they will give them a score on a 5-point scale, 1 through 5. 1 might be no, 5 is yes, and then all the ones in the middle there. So they do that individually. They take their time looking through letters of recommendation, resumes, cover letters, all of those things, and then they give them that score, and we eventually get together and we meet online, and I have a printout of that list that shows the degree of interest in some candidates more than another. And so it's a compilation of the opinions of 5 people. So in that process, there are some that immediately rise to the top, strong candidates, everyone agreed, they all got yeses, or maybe yeses. There will also be some folks in the pool that perhaps, especially with an outstanding pool like yours, aren't quite as strong. And so those might be in the maybe no category. And so there's some folks we don't spend as much time on because they are not as qualified as the other folks in the pool. Then we talk a long time about those ones in the middle and try to sort of sort them into areas. We end up with a list of folks we feel are very strong that we want to learn more about. So in your case, we ended up vetting 10 people out of the pool of 20 that we thought really rose to the top. So that did include a pre-interview on the phone with each of those folks. It included social media sweep for all of the people in the pool, and actually not just those 10, but we do a social media sweep of everybody. Reference checks, although we are limited to calling the references they've provided in their application because their names are private data, so we can't go down a rabbit hole trying to talk to people that might know them. We have to be very careful of the fact that their name is not public. So we talk to those folks, do reference checking, and eventually we reconvene to talk about what we've all learned. Out of that meeting arises those we feel most align, even though I think they're all very strong with what you're looking for in the next leader. So you can see on the sheet I just distributed to you, there are 10 people, what I call the highlighted list, and those are the individuals that we would suggest you consider interviewing. Those in yellow eventually rose to the top. That doesn't mean that you have to interview those 7 people, nor that you couldn't interview the folks that are in the other highlighted color, nor anyone on the list, because there are many people on the list as well that you might be intrigued with that we are not recommending. So I'm happy to answer questions about that. Before I read the presentation forms, which is a very high-level overview of the 7 that we have decided to put forth, are there other folks that you have questions about as to why not a certain candidate, for example? I'm happy to do my best to address that in this meeting, keeping in mind that I'm bound by data privacy laws also, and I will not be able to speak specifically about why not, because it might actually reveal who I'm talking about. But are there questions on the other candidates that are not highlighted on that list?
I have one, so I'll just let you know the letter. Yeah,
You can say letter.
R.
R as in rabbit?
Yes.
I think for us, it came down to the complexity of your system and the size of Wayzata Public Schools. Also a strong candidate. No reason not to interview them. No red flags. No concerns over licensure or any of those things. I think it just came down to some dissimilarities between Wayzata Public Schools and the experience that candidate R has.
Okay. All right. No, fair. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Barb, can you just share with us candidate S as in Sam?
Okay, also very strong. It's easy when the pool's not that great. And we have 5 or 6 people that immediately rise up, and much easier. But this required a great deal of work. And so S as in Sam, correct. Okay, so for this candidate, again, acknowledging very strong, great experience. Ultimately, there are folks in the pool with similar experience and more depth, again, in the size of the district that you are. Length of time served in positions can be a determining factor, and sometimes a longer tenure in a position provides you with the ability to wrap your arms around academics and HR and operations in a way that a shorter tenure does not. So length of tenure can be one thing as well. But again, in a different pool, I think, boy, a lot of these folks would be right at the very top. This is just an extraordinarily deep pool, so it's a little bit harder for folks to perhaps break through. But I will say candidate S was very strong, and we considered them very strongly as well. It was after we came back from our conversations that we had to take 10 and try and sift it out, into 6, and we couldn't settle on 6 even. It was that good. So thank you for asking, and you are absolutely welcome to interview anyone you would like, including R or S as well.
Oops.
All right, if there's no questions, I'm going to briefly read the overview of the 7 that we are suggesting as semifinalists. I do want to make a note that when I read this, you might hear a little bit different tone in the writing, and that's because we had 5 people doing this research, and they each wrote up different presentation forms. So some are a little more verbose than others, and yet they are all equally recommended by us. So I'm going to begin and just read a high-level overview. Of all the people I'm visiting with you about, we recommend all 7 of them. All of them have indicated a willingness to interview if offered an opportunity by the board. So I'm just going to assume that for everyone, that they meet your hiring criteria and are very, very interested. Candidate A has experience as a superintendent, assistant superintendent, and teacher. Their current licenses include superintendent, principal, and teacher. And their education includes a 6-year degree, a master's, a Bachelor of Arts, and a Bachelor of Science. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what references told us about this person, and then a little bit about why MSBA is recommending them. Those are the sort of 2 paragraphs I'm going to read. So first of all, references state that candidate A seeks a district that aligns with their values, experience, and commitment to meaningful educational impact. They believe that trust must be clearly defined and intentionally cultivated through the development of a co-created trust framework, which then serves as the foundation for all leadership action district-wide. They listen to students and parents to understand what they are eager to learn, and then aligns programming with those desires. Candidate A focuses on accountability and financial stewardship by using district systems to evaluate academic data effectively and to manage district resources responsibly. Continuous improvement is embedded throughout the system, demonstrating progress toward district priorities. That is what references stated about candidate A. MSBA is recommending candidate A because they were instrumental in fund balance improvement that helped shifted the district's overall mindset from scarcity to possibility. This transition has also strengthened the community narrative as a trusted partner with families. Throughout challenging periods, candidate A demonstrated extraordinary grit, courage, and persistence. They are an educator with an uppercase E, grounded in purpose, deep commitment to students, and an unwavering pursuit of equitable outcomes. They consistently provide meaningful support and work collaboratively through transparency and strong relationships, which begin with listening and understanding to build trust with teams and to build strengthening through the entire organization. Candidate A. We are also recommending candidate C for your consideration. Their experience is as a superintendent, assistant superintendent, principal, director of human resources, director of instruction, teacher, and consultant. Their current licenses are as a superintendent. Their degrees include a doctorate, a specialist degree, a master's degree, and a Bachelor of Arts. References describe candidate C as a principled, goal-oriented leader who values input and collaboration in pursuit of continuous improvement. References noted that candidate C is a visionary leader and a skilled communicator who is equity-oriented and student-centered. Candidate C builds relationships and trust through intentional accessibility and visibility. Notably, candidate C has established long community partnerships and lasting coalitions with broad regional impact. They are also a large systems thinker. As for candidate C, we are recommending them because they are an experienced leader who holds high standards for professional excellence. Their work, characterized by large-scale systems change related to both operational and instructional practices, has resulted in improved outcomes for students and enhanced engagement from employees. Candidate C possesses the skill and professional qualities this board is seeking in your next superintendent. That is candidate C. This is candidate E. Their experience includes superintendent, assistant superintendent, principal, chief operations officer, and director of elementary education. Their current licenses include a superintendent and a principal, and their education includes a doctorate, a master's, and a Bachelor of Science. References for candidate E share a consensus that they are a visionary, data-driven, student-centered leader. E is also a collaborative systems thinker who can delegate and trust their employees to do their work. They still hold high expectations and provide accountability and support when needed to get the work done, however. They often provide the coaching required to do so. Candidate E values and respects all employees regardless of their role in the district and is considered an accessible, strong communicator who is respectful in interactions with people, even when they may disagree. MSBA is recommending candidate E because they are a mission-driven systems thinker whose experience enables them to understand systems and engage stakeholders in creating and realizing a student-centered vision. They are a charismatic leader who is forward-thinking and leads with intention, valuing and respecting the various roles employees play in realizing that vision. Candidate E has high expectations and provides strong support to all. They are also a focused, transparent leader who has high expectations. That is candidate E. Candidate H has experience as an assistant superintendent, a principal, dean of students, head of schools, assistant professor, consultant, and teacher. Their current licenses are as a superintendent, principal, and teacher. Their education includes a doctorate, master's, and Bachelor of Arts. Candidate H, colleagues describe them as a dynamic, student-centered leader who builds trust through attention to relationships and who has had a profound impact on organizational culture. References use words and phrases such as courageous, tenacious in the pursuit of equitable outcomes and instructional excellence, adaptive, culturally aware, and responsive further describe candidate H. Finally, candidate H is described as being an inspirational coach and mentor who sets standards for high-quality learning environments and who lifts others to higher levels of performance. MSBA is recommending candidate H because they possess the skills and attributes this school board is seeking in their next superintendent. They are an experienced leader who builds shared vision, uses data to ground strategy, and ensures inclusive and collaborative processes to improve outcomes for all students. They are a conscientious leader who prioritizes the whole student and works tirelessly to remove all barriers to student success. That is H. We're now to applicant candidate K. They have experience as a superintendent, principal, and assistant principal. Their current licenses include as a superintendent, principal, and teacher, and their education includes a doctorate, a 6-year degree, and a Bachelor of Science. References describe candidate K as energetic and visionary. They have been innovative relative to student success academically and in preparation for post-secondary options. They are said to possess a brilliant mind and a passion for what is best for students. Candidate K has demonstrated the ability to make critical assessments of the needs of students and challenged all stakeholders to provide a better future for next generations. Candidate K is a capable, hardworking, and dedicated educational leader. MSBA's recommendation is because candidate K has experience, documented past successes, and knowledge of educational strategies. In addition, they have significant experience with community building, leading innovations that are measurable, and experience with bond construction issues. Candidate K also possesses an international lens which provides a unique perspective on educational issues and experiences. That is candidate K. Candidate L is being recommended. They have experience as an assistant superintendent, executive director, principal, and assistant principal. Current licenses include as a superintendent and a principal, and their education includes a doctorate, 6-year degree, and Bachelor of Arts. References describe candidate L as smart, innovative, with great vision. They hold strengths as a teacher leader. They hold strengths as a teacher leader, and in addition, they are well organized, value people's voices, and are a great listener. Candidate L has documented successes at multiple levels for raising academic success for all, in reducing achievement disparities and in harnessing technology for the benefit of students across all grade levels. MSBA is recommending candidate L because they have experience, documented past successes, and extraordinary knowledge of educational strategies and initiatives. In addition, candidate L has experience as a principal and department supervision, leading innovations that are measurable and have familiarity with the most up-to-date academic innovations. Much of their educational experiences are directly applicable to Wayzata Public Schools, and their district-level experience bodes well for serving WPS. And last but not least, candidate T. They have experience as a superintendent, assistant superintendent, director, assistant director, and school psychologist. Their current licenses are as a superintendent, principal, special education director, and school psychologist. Their education includes a 6-year degree and a master's. References describe candidate T as someone who is known for accelerating system-wide progress and driving collective improvement across the district through a data-driven lens, closely analyzing student performance and system indicators to identify areas where the district can improve and to determine what is required to reach the next level of excellence. They set clear standards for the team through intentional guidance and relationship-based support. They strategically build trust and support through communication, commitment, and collaboration, strengthening alignment across stakeholder groups. Their leadership style has made them highly sought after by other districts throughout their career. Candidate T demonstrates a student-centered and purpose-driven leadership style, this is MSBA's recommendation, with commitment to equitable outcomes. Candidate T's leadership style is characterized by strong listening skills and their ability to synthesize multiple viewpoints and translate them into effective strategies. They not only understand diverse perspectives, but also build mechanisms that ensure plans are executed efficiently and improvements are sustained. As a steward of district resources, Candidate T is deeply committed to advancing board priorities and ensuring alignment both horizontally and vertically. That is candidate T. That was a lot. I just read an overview of 7 extraordinarily capable school administrators, and there are more than that in your pool. So again, congratulations on the pool. I'm going to turn it back over to Chair Sohoni to facilitate a conversation. Please do remember that, where's my list of what we can and can't talk about? Please do not use names, where they work, no mention of their past or current employers, no references to the size of their districts, no mention of geographic location, no gender identifiers, and no asking specific questions about something you saw on social media. This is where it gets tricky. Discussing private data in a public meeting is not easy, but I really want to thank you in advance for your help with this. This is why we are able to share all of the application materials with board members, because boards have been very good about keeping these names and their identities private. So thank you.
Thank you, Barb. So is this the time now to get the recommended action approved? Or is there any
Usually now
discussion?
someone says whether they agree or disagree with the list we're providing, or if they have questions or want to add someone else into the mix, and eventually.
Can that
have a
come during
resolution.
a discussion?
Yep.
Okay, so
Correct.
maybe I can recommend to move second, and then when we do the discussion, they can
During
say that.
discussion, sure, however you'd like to do it. Every district is a little different.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Barb. So the recommended action, board colleagues, is to approve extending an offer for first round interviews for the Wayzata Public Schools superintendency to the following candidates: Candidate A, Candidate C, Candidate E, Candidate H, Candidate K, Candidate L, and Candidate T. Is there a motion?
I so move.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Is there a discussion?
So, candidate T, I'm wondering if the rest of the board might have similar wonderments about this candidate. I don't even know if I need to say what it is. Does anybody else wonder about this candidate? Okay, I might have to be a little bit more specific then.
When you say wonder, are you saying whether or not we should extend an interview?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it doesn't hurt to interview, but I do have some
Reservations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking, and please do not be specific. I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Do you think that you could connect with Barb
Maybe.
about this one? Yeah.
Well, I didn't know if other people were feeling similarly.
I think I know where you're going with, but I'll hold my questions back because I think you should talk to Barb.
I guess, Sheila, I would say I would consider that individual to be someone I'm still interested in, but I hear what you're saying, and I don't know that it would be enough for me personally to say they shouldn't be in.
Yeah, and I think I agree.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said, Alicia?
I wouldn't consider my wonderments to be enough to not present an offer to round one.
Right. I think we will have an opportunity in at least 2 rounds, which will clarify, or at least it'll give us some more inputs, if you will, as an individual, right, and as a leader.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I asked about candidate R, and I found similarities with one of the other 7 candidates. So is that something I should take directly with you offline? Again, some of the parameters you already clarified. I felt candidate R could very well be in one of those criterias. So I was just wondering, again, rest of the board members, should R be considered for interview, or there are any other aspects that you feel maybe not up to the mark? So again, I'm not suggesting that we have to, just wanted to be open and fair. So just wanted to ask you that.
I mean, it's hard because I think we all have that individual
Right.
did not float to the top for me personally. So unless that's something different, that's kind of how I looked at this. Is I was pleasantly surprised that the candidates that I had highlighted did make the top 7, and so then I went from there and went a little bit, deeper maybe. But that's my only feedback.
Yeah, and all of my candidates actually, they made to the list. So again, this was one that sort of stood out. So again, I just wanted to make sure. But again, I totally agree. If there is nothing significant from any other board members, I'm okay with what we have. Just wanted to check.
Yeah, Dan.
I am happy and accepting with the recommended slate of candidates put to us. I think they bring strong credentials.
So I already asked you questions about candidate S. Was it S? Yeah, S initially. But overall, I think I'm good with the 7 that were recommended by MSBA, and I'm hoping that my board colleagues will also agree with that. So, okay, so I'm going to read the recommended action again. Recommended action is to approve extending an offer for first round interviews for the Wayzata Public Schools Superintendency to the following candidates: Candidate A, Candidate C, Candidate E, Candidate H, Candidate K, Candidate L, and Candidate T. This is a roll call vote, Ryan.
Colleagues, Valentina Ayers,
Yes.
Dan Ginestra votes yes. Alicia Little,
Yes.
Paris Bendy,
Yes.
Sheila Pryor,
Yes.
Heidi Cater,
Yes.
Millen Zahoni.
Yes, the motion passes. Thank you, Dan. So anything else, Barb?
No, but thank you very much. I appreciate the careful discussion. It is not easy to do this, but you did a very nice job. What will happen next is I will reach out to actually all 10 of the folks that we vetted at length and let them know personally if they are or are not going to be interviewing in Wayzata. And then we'll be discussing with the subcommittee the dates and times of each of those interviews, because there will be 7. And so we'll bring that back to the board when we have that schedule ready to go. But congratulations. I feel like you have your next superintendent in this mix because it is such a wide variety of experience and approaches. It was just the 6 of us on our team have spent hours and hours and hours dissecting the people in this pool, and we couldn't be more excited for you. So congratulations. I'm looking forward to next steps.
Thank you, Barb. Okay, so this concludes the Wayzata Public School.
Just
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Anisha.
Just very quickly, Barb, I want to thank you so much. I mean, I jokingly said coming in that, I mean, it's been really engaging to look at all of these applicants, and I appreciate the time and energy they've all put in. And yes, to see all of the different personalities coming through, you know, I'm so glad we have such a great pool, but I also appreciate the amount of hours it must have taken your team to really go through all of this and give us those really much.
Yeah. And it's very methodical. That's the best part about it. It's the process is very rigorous. Again, you are leveraging data at every step of the way, including the community feedback and so on. So thank you. This is really great. Some of the comments you shared did resonate as we were looking at the profiles. So that makes sense. So that gives us more and more confidence. So thank you for all your help and support.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Barb. So this concludes the Wayzata Public Schools special regular board meeting. Our next meeting is the regular meeting at 7 o'clock. And the time now is 6:03. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries. The Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education special regular meeting for Monday, February 9, 2026 is adjourned.